Welcome to This is Getting Old. I'm your host, Melissa B., PhD, and today we're going to be talking about what is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia and normal aging. A lot of us have been home during the COVID pandemic. Maybe you're interacting with your older relatives more than usual, and you may be noticing some memory problems. And so what we're going to do today is talk about what are the top 10 warning signs that you should look for if you're worried about somebody having an issue with their memory, so that you can get them in to a provider to have it checked out. So the first question is, what is dementia? And basically, dementia is a broad umbrella term, which means that there are a lot of different symptoms that go into this term for dementia. And there are a lot of different things that happen. People are going to have difficulty with their memory. They're going to have trouble with language. Typically, nouns and naming are one of the first things that we'll see them having issues with, but also problem solving and executive planning. And executive planning is the ability to kind of plan and execute an event, whether it's a recipe you've made forever or what's the correct order to put in your clothes on. But Alzheimer's is a type of dementia, and it actually accounts for about 60 to 80% of the different dementias that we see. The other dementias that are most common are Lewy body dementia, a frontal lobe dementia, and dementia related to Parkinson's, but also vascular dementia. So those types of dementias tend to appear a little bit differently. For example, with Lewy body dementia, you may see someone having trouble walking or falling more. Someone with a frontal lobe dementia, the frontal lobe of your brain is kind of the stop sign part. So these may be people that they don't have a lot of good impulse control anymore. And then somebody with vascular dementia typically already has heart disease. So you may have one type, or you may have a mix of things, particularly if you have like high blood pressure, or you've had many strokes in the past, and you may have Alzheimer's. So you may have a combination of Alzheimer's type dementia and a vascular dementia. And at the end of the day, for the most part, these symptoms are pretty similar. And so we're just going to talk about the top 10 signs and things that you should look for if you're concerned about somebody's memory. So first one is that this memory problem needs to be significant enough that it's going to interrupt this person's ability to take care of themselves every day. So one of the most common things in Alzheimer's is that you aren't able to remember new information. So they're really good with things that happened a long, long time ago. So that long-term memory is intact. And so they can tell you everything about their childhood, but they can't tell you what they had for breakfast or what you were just talking about 5 minutes ago. So they may be forgetting important dates. They may be asking you the same information over and over, or maybe telling you the same information over and over. Or you may begin to see them rely a lot more on memory aids. And a memory aid to me is basically a compensatory strategy. I have tons of them, but basically this would be if you started seeing sticky notes appear on the refrigerator, don't forget to do this, don't forget to do that. And as long as people can do that and it's working for them, while it is a warning sign, they still have the ability to use those compensatory strategies. So we need to let them do that. Versus normal aging would be like you occasionally forgot somebody's name, or you might forget an appointment, but you do remember it later. So the second sign to look out for are challenges with problem solving. So this is when someone has trouble kind of developing a plan for work or an activity that they want to do, or they may have trouble following a familiar recipe. So the recipe they're known for forever, they may not remember if it's 2 eggs or 3 eggs, or how much water and how long am I supposed to cook it. Or they may have trouble keeping up with their monthly bills because they just don't remember that they're supposed to deal with that. Or they may have a lot more difficulty concentrating, and it just takes them a lot longer to do things than it did before. Versus, with a normal age-related change, this might be someone who just has an occasional error in their checkbook. I kind of do that too sometimes. So don't jump to conclusions just because one of these warning signs might apply to you or your loved one. The third sign is difficulty completing familiar tasks at home or at work, or even out when you're playing. So sometimes people have trouble figuring out how do I drive from to a particular location, someplace they've been a lot, or how do they manage their budget at work, or maybe even remember the rules of a game. That becomes more difficult. And that's different than like normal age-related change, where you may need a little bit of help with the settings on a microwave, or need help trying to record a television show, which is different than just trying to turn the television on. So those are a little bit more complex tasks that, and I know if I go to my mom's house, I still can't figure out how to use their remotes. So again, if they're in their own home and this is a new problem that you're noticing, you just need to be aware of it. The next thing is confusion with time and place. And so people with Alzheimer's can lose track of what time it is. Again, this is one of those things in the middle of COVID, a lot of us are probably having trouble keeping up with time. And it's just because our schedules and the calendars that we live and die by, they just are in a completely different thing right now. But this will be someone who didn't know that it was summer outside when it's, and they would tell you it's winter. Or they may be telling you it's 1987 or telling you a story from 1987 when it's 2020. So they also may have trouble remembering how they got where they are. So that's another group of warning signs. Compared to normal aging, you might get confused about what day of the week it is, but to get your calendar out or pull out your iPhone and you can figure out what day it is. So lucky for all of us in COVID, we can figure out what day it is. The next warning sign is they have trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. So let's break that down. Sometimes just having visual problems is a sign of Alzheimer's. They may have difficulty reading, judging distances, or determining color and contrast. And this also could cause them problems with driving. This is different than having like a true visual impairment related to either a cataract or glaucoma or some age-related macular degeneration. Those are truly visual problems, but the visual part of the brain is impacted with Alzheimer's. When you're young, you basically have 180-degree peripheral vision, and by the time you're 65, that comes in about 45 degrees. But what happens with Alzheimer's disease is that visual field gets smaller and smaller. So by the time somebody's in very advanced dementia, they basically have they have monocular vision that then goes down to binocular vision. So if you were to put I call these your dementia eyeballs, if you were to put those on and think about if that was all that you could see, you can't see anything on either side of you. And what I tell people with my work is it also means they can't see the plate that's sitting right in front of them. So in very advanced dementia, this is when we would see people reach across the table to eat somebody else's food. And everyone's like, but your food is right here in front of you. But you think about, you'd have to look down to see that. So we have to adjust to them, and we'll get to that later with advanced Alzheimer's. This right now, what we're talking about is early signs. So the next one is having new problems with words and speaking, as well as writing. So you may see this as somebody who's having trouble following a conversation, or they may be telling you a story and stop in the middle of it and can't figure out, what they were going to do, or they may tell you the same story over and over, or they may have difficulty finding the right word. And typically this is a noun. So they might be like, hand me that, thing over there. It's, kind of the small thing. You can talk on it to call people. And you're like, do you mean your phone? They're like, yes, that's my phone. So that kind of describing all around the noun is called circumlocution. So you may see a little bit more of that. And the other part of that is in normal aging, you might just have trouble finding the right word. So a little bit different when someone's beginning to have memory issues. So the seventh warning sign to pay attention to is someone may misplace things or they may lose their ability to retrace their steps to find it. So we've all misplaced things before, but typically, and I do this with my kids, I'm like, you need to retrace your steps and figure out where, where you were when you might have lost this thing. What happens a lot of times with people with early Alzheimer's is they begin to get a little paranoid. And so they may begin to hide things, like I'm going to hide my purse, or I'm going to put my purse, in this safe place. And then when they go to find their purse, they can't find it, and then they blame you for stealing it. So that's just another example of how they may actually put something away, but then they can't remember where they put it. And this would occur, more and more frequently over time. Versus, normal aging is when someone they misplace things, but they are able to retrace their steps. And lucky for us, we always find what we were looking for in the last place we looked, which I've always thought was a hilarious pun. All right, number 8, may have decreased or poor judgment. And so this gets back into the decision-making piece. So they may think they have more ability to take care of themselves than they actually do. They may have poor judgment when it comes to dealing with money. This also makes them very susceptible to scams because, particularly if they're isolated in their home, someone calls them on the phone and they may end up giving them, a large sum of money because they just didn't have the judgment to know that they were being scammed. Or you may see this as less paying attention to their own personal hygiene. So they may stop showering, brushing their hair, that type of stuff, when they used to be a very well kept person. And that's different than normal aging, where you may make a bad decision every once in a while, but you're pretty good with knowing what your limits are. The 9th sign is when people withdraw from work or social activities. So this may be someone that you just haven't seen for a while, and in COVID, that's kind of all of us. But these folks would have begun to remove themselves from all of their hobbies, all of their social activities, any different projects, or going out of the house. And they may even begin to have trouble following like their favorite team. And they begin to avoid social situations because they're very aware that they're having trouble with their memory, and they're afraid that you're going to find out about it. So the way this typically would show up for me, one of the parts of the brain that remains intact is this ability to do what we call social chit chat. So you can be sitting and, I can be talking to an older adult and everything's fine. We're having the social conversation. How's the weather? How are your kids, blah, blah. And then I say to them, okay, I need to begin to ask you some questions. I ask these questions of everyone. Do you know what today's date is? And they would fire back like in super angry mode, like a overreaction to what the question is. But what I did is I just began to ask them questions that they feel like I'm going to find out that they're having issues with their memory. And that's a whole nother conversation about how to handle that type of behavior. But this may be somebody that, they can go through a doctor's visit for 15 minutes and act like everything's fine. So this is why it's hard for primary care providers to pick up on this, and they need the history from the family caregivers around some of these warning signs to help provide a full picture of what's happening at home and how well they're functioning at home. But again, if you start, we're going to do another podcast about how to actually communicate about this, but you may not be able to sit in the room with that person and tell that provider because it's going to make your loved one mad. And versus, for normal aging, sometimes people, they just don't have as much energy as they used to. So they may be more tired after a work day or after going to family and social engagements, but they are still very much socially engaged. And then the last warning sign is changes in their moods or personality. And so this could be someone that's very confused. They could be very depressed. They could be anxious. They could be scared. And then they're a lot more easily upset when they're out of places that are part of their comfort zone. So prior to COVID, this might be somebody that lives, in their home alone. They can manage things pretty fine, but they go out to eat with the family and there's a lot more noise. in that environment, and they just have like this explosive like moment. And so kind of those rapid changes in mood, or even their personality, where they used to be really outgoing and now, they don't want to go out and see anyone. Compared to normal aging, when people develop very specific ways of doing things, and they can become pretty irritable when that routine is interrupted. So I had two thoughts. One is, people that are in the middle of a story and forget what they were going to say. I think that could be, an ADD type issue. And, this having very specific ways of doing things, I'm like, yeah, that could just be a little OCD. So again, it really has to do with the big picture of that person over their lifetime. How well have they been able to do things? And then, as they age, are you seeing some of these warning signs? And again, they are only warning signs. They're not diagnostic. We'll talk in another show about how you actually talk to somebody about Alzheimer's, and then how we actually get to a diagnosis. But for now, these are your top 10 warning signs, and hope you've enjoyed this session.
Thank you for joining me today for This Is Getting Old. If you'd like to know more, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you have any questions or a related topic you'd like to hear from me about, just let me know. Thanks.